My beloved child, there are places where long, desperate cries cannot reach. There are depths where repeated pleas echo only the emptiness of their own sound. Yet death itself trembles when a heart knows how to rise at the exact moment I speak. You believe I listen because of the number of words you utter, but I listen through the gentle inclination of your soul toward me. When a child takes a quiet step toward the light, not because it understands all things, but because it trusts the call, resurrection begins like a living sprout pushing through dry stone. Do you see? My child, death does not waver at the volume or length of petitions, but trembles before a heart that walks in step with my voice. A lamp does not shine brighter because someone begs it to. It shines when connected to the right source. Your soul does not come alive because of frantic tears, but because of your surrender to the one who breathed life first into you. I spoke, "Lazarus, come out." And he emerged from the darkness not because of the prayers of the crowd, but because my voice opened the door of life and led him out from a place where earth and stone believed they had sealed his fate. My child, the tomb does not listen to explanations, does not care about effort, and is not persuaded by reasoning. It responds only to authority. Death does not make way out of sympathy for you. It yields only when I command it. There are souls who pray for many years, yet their hearts remain still like stone because they have not stepped into my word from within. They beg me to change their circumstances, but when I call their name, they remain lying there, unmoved, as though my voice were only a gentle breeze. You must understand that life does not begin at the point you desire, but at the point you answer, like a seed kept still beneath dry soil. It does not burst forth because people shout at it. It arises when light arrives in its appointed time. My word is that light, and obedience is the opening in the earth through which the sprout breaks from darkness. Not by your power, my child, but by your connection to me does the new life begin to flow through your weary heart. Do not think obedience is thunder, or a dramatic cry of strength. Sometimes it is only one small step toward me, a slight turning of the head away from the noise, a quiet acceptance whispered in the dark. Those who look from the outside may not see that movement, but death sees it. Darkness sees it. For my power does not flow from your outward display, but from your authentic surrender. One silent soul that walks according to my word is stronger than 1,000 voices shouting with hearts as hardened as stone. You once thought I needed your intense emotions, but what I need is the opening of your door. Emotional outbursts may move tears, but only obedience moves destiny. When you place your first step upon the path I show, the atmosphere around you changes, not because your voice grows louder, but because your will has merged with mine. My child, I do not call you into obedience as a slave forced to submit, but as a pilgrim who recognizes their home by the sound of the call. You have walked through many seasons with your hands clenched around fear, believing that if you pleaded long enough you would prove yourself worthy. Yet I never required proof. I only required your heart to return to its proper rhythm. There are those who call to me with thunderous petitions, but when I speak, they still grip the reins of their own lives, afraid that if they let go, they will lose control. But my child, what they call control is only a cloak woven from anxiety. The tomb is not shattered by control, but by my command. When you rise because I call your name, you cross a boundary death cannot hold. Resurrection does not require you to understand the whole story. It requires you to open the door when the light knocks. And this is what I want you to carry into the beginning. Do not try to impress death with emotion. Do not try to stir the heavens with empty words. Connect yourself to the source. Step forward with an open heart. Let my voice flow through you in trust. I do not need you to become a heroic figure. I need you to become a soul that listens. I do not call you so you may prove your strength. I call you so that I may sow new life within you. When you rise at the exact moment I speak, the tomb opens not because you produced a miracle, but because you aligned yourself with its orbit. Power always flows, but only a heart of obedience becomes its vessel. My child, hold on to this anchor. Death does not waver at the volume or length of petitions, but trembles before the heart that walks in step with my voice. My child, there are nights when your soul cries out like one stranded in the sea, arms flailing in panic, mouth repeating the same plea only to soothe itself. You think that the more you speak, the closer you come to the answer. But in truth, you only circle around the axis of fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear that the future will not unfold as you imagined. And every word you utter revolves around a hidden question. How can everything remain within my grasp when prayer is built upon fear? It is like a boat spinning in a whirlpool, thinking it is moving forward but going nowhere, only exhausted. I do not blame you for being afraid. I only want you to see that fear cannot be the foundation of a dialogue between you and me. I do not build my house upon trembling sand. I build upon the rock of trust, where your heart learns to breathe slowly in my presence, instead of rushing in panic from things that have not yet happened. Those prayers are not cries seeking me, but desperate attempts to protect what you refuse to place in my hands. You say, Lord, do this for me. But within you whispers, do not touch this area of my life. Do not change this plan. Do not take from me what I believe is life. In that moment, prayer becomes a fence to keep me at a safe distance, to confine me to the edge of the story rather than allow me to step into its center. Do you see, my child, a prayer built on fear circles only around desire. It does not open doors. It only adds more locks. It makes you feel as if you are drawing near to me, when in truth you are only trying to pull me nearer to your will. I hear those rushed breaths, and I know they come from deep wounds. But I do not want you to live forever in a defensive posture. I long to lead you out of the land where each prayer is merely a hollow echo of insecurity, and into the place of peace where you can say, I do not understand everything, but I know the Father is good. Obedience sounds heavy to souls accustomed to managing everything on their own. But to those who learn to trust me, it becomes the bridge that lifts them out of their own cycles. Obedience is not the silencing of desire, but the placing of desire into the hands of the one who sees farther, deeper, and wider than you do. When you say, let your will be done, you do not disappear. You merely stop imprisoning yourself within walls built by fear. You once believed that if you did not cling tightly to the wheel, you would drown, but your hands tremble, and mine are steady. Prayer, grounded in fear, circles only around desires. Obedience, grounded in trust, guides you into my harbor. Do you recognize that harbor? It is the place where the soul ceases to argue, ceases to haggle with fate, ceases to continually inspect timelines, and begins to rest in the reality that I know you. I see you. I lead you. Obedience is not the end of the story. It is the turning of a page that opens the chapter you have never dared to write. Imagine a boat in the middle of the night sea, waves striking against its sides, and every instinct within you pointing in one direction. How can I make this storm stop right now? You beg the wind to be still. Beg the waves to quiet down. Beg the sky to clear in accordance with the plan you drew. But I stand at the bow of the ship, not merely to calm the raging sea, but to invite you to take your hands off the wheel. When your prayer shifts from, please preserve what I want to, please lead me to where you desire, then the storm may not end immediately, but the course begins to change. Obedience is like allowing me to drop the anchor precisely where it needs to be. Even when your eyes cannot yet see the shore, And so, while the waves outside still roar, your soul begins to touch a new certainty. You are no longer drifting according to fear. You are being anchored to an invisible harbor I have already prepared. That harbor is not an ideal circumstance, but a restored relationship, where you learn to stop measuring your worth by what you manage to hold on to, and begin measuring it by the one who holds you. I do not compare the number of times you pray. I look at the place from which the prayer rises. I know there are days when you can utter only a few whispers, yet your heart stands wide open, and I also know there are hours when you speak many words, yet the inner door remains shut. I am not ashamed of your weakness. I only grieve when you fear that I am less good than the terror you cling to. My harbor is not a place where you are deprived, but where you are returned to yourself. No longer a human being controlled by the fear of failure, haunted by the burden of keeping everything intact. When you place your trust in me, obedience becomes lighter, no longer the burden of one who is coerced, but the step of one who has understood that the hand guiding them never trembles. I do not promise you a sea of life that is always calm, but I promise you that you will always have a place to dock, and that place is me, the one who never changes. When you begin to understand that I am the source, something quiet unfolds within the soul. The prayer stops trying to manipulate circumstances and begins to listen for the pulse of guidance. Life does not rise from the effort to cling and control, but from attaching yourself to my current, like a drop of water falling into the soil. It does not raise its head to summon the sun, does not shout for light, does not beg the grain to grow to prove its worth. It simply rests in silence, allowing the sun to draw it upward in its appointed season. Many souls grow weary because they believe miracles come from pushing me. But miracles always come from the harmony between my appointed time and the heart that has learned to step away from its inner turmoil. Spiritual action is not dragging the sky down with desperate pleas, but walking in step with the voice that already resounds in the heavens. When you understand that I am the source, you stop begging from the world. You stop pushing the waves while you are at sea. You allow the sea to teach you how to float. For I placed buoyancy in the water from the very beginning. Obedience does not always carry a solemn expression. Sometimes it is simply the act of rising from your old posture, even just one step, to touch my rhythm, like an underground spring. It does not pound on the earth, demanding an opening. It does not cry out to limestone begging for permission to flow. It simply endures the compression of time until the pressure is enough, and the earth splits on its own for the water to rise. Prayers, rooted in fear, always try to change the surface, while trust understands that what I do often begins within. You may think silence is failure, but silence is sometimes the phase in which I compress you so the water within you can find its path. That pressure does not destroy you. It opens fissures that allow the stream to travel farther than it has ever known. Therefore, do not fear the seasons when you cannot hear the wind, for beneath the earth, the spring is being prepared. I do not ask you to understand every depth of my operation. I only ask you to trust that when the pressure is sufficient, life will move. There are souls who speak hundreds of words to me, yet only to preserve control. And there are souls who say very little, yet every word is a key that opens doors. When you only ask me to rearrange the scene to match your will, you are declaring that the world is the authority over destiny. But when you listen, prayer is no longer centered on grant what I want, but becomes lead me to the place of your light. From that moment, prayer ceases to be the frantic breath fighting against the darkness, and becomes the steady breathing of a soul that has recognized I am the dawn. I do not need you to defeat the night. I only need you to open the window, for the light is already waiting outside. Spiritual action does not lie in the intensity of gestures or the ferocity of resolutions, but in letting me become the governing principle of your life. Then you no longer strive to live, you allow my life to flow through you. Those who have not understood the source often attempt to compensate for their insecurity with volume. They believe the thicker their prayers, the closer the answer must be. Yet they forget that the sea is not fuller because the waves roar, but because the rivers find their rightful paths into it. I want you to learn how to flow, not how to shout. When you walk in response to the one who calls you, you no longer try to prove your sincerity. You allow your steps to be the testimony. I do not call you to haste, but to steadiness. You do not need to know everything in order to move. You only need to know that I do not change. When you walk with this awareness, the things that once terrified you become small, not because they disappear, but because you no longer use them to measure your stature. You stop asking, "How do I win?" and begin asking, "Where do you want me to go?" This is the secret of spiritual action. It does not depend on how you feel, but on your union with the source. Electricity does not flow because the cable begs. It flows because it is connected. Connection does not begin in noise, but in contact. When your heart touches me, you will see that even the smallest step has weight. Light does not need the consent of darkness to shine. It only needs you, not to cover your eyes. When you understand that I am the source, your prayer no longer tries to persuade me, but becomes the whisper of companionship. Allow me to walk after you. And it is precisely this walking, no matter how silent, that causes darkness to yield. For it is not the sound of your voice that shakes the realm of death, but my power moving in a soul that has opened its door. There are moments when you think you have obeyed simply because your heart trembled, because you felt uplifted, because the prayer made your tears fall like a sacred mark. But obedience is not a beautiful emotion. It is not the moment you melt in the light and then return to your old path. Obedience is the union between my will and the rhythm of your soul, where you do not merely agree in thought, but step into the path I open, even when you cannot yet see the destination. The heartbeat does not exist because it is cheered on. It beats according to the law of life. You do not urge it every morning to be strong. Yet it continues because life within has established its order. So too, obedience does not require you to convince yourself each day through emotion, for emotion comes and goes like wind across the field. Obedience only requires you to step into the orbit I have called you to, allowing my will to become the force of every stride. As the heart beats by life and not by applause, you once thought that a mature soul is one that feels spiritual shifts deeply, that trembles when I touch it, that becomes moved when I remind it. But sentiment is not the proof of union. A soul may shed tears beneath a beautiful sunset, then turn its back the moment reality presses in. The spiritual path is not built by flashes of light in the night, but by the habit of placing each step into my guidance at every dawn. Like a tree root gripping the earth, it does not summon the sun to prove its growth. It quietly draws nourishment from places no one sees. When you align your will with mine, obedience becomes a natural motion, requiring no proclamation, no emotional evidence, no perfect backdrop to begin. You simply know your feet must tread where I point, and that is enough. Obedience is not doing what is right when everything is easy, nor is it agreeing when what I speak happens to align with the plans you already set. Obedience is continuing to listen even when what I call you into leads you away from your safe zone, away from what you understand. You once asked me, "How do I know that I am obeying correctly?" And I answered quietly, "When you no longer seek to preserve your own will." In that moment, you do not have to force yourself to feel at peace. Peace appears on its own like the shadow of a tree when the sun passes by. The union between my will and your steps is not a contract born of fear, but an encounter where the soul understands that life is not found in holding on, but in letting go. Just as a fruit does not fall because someone declares that it is time, It falls because the lifeblood within it has completed its cycle. So it is with you when you immerse yourself in my will. Actions blossom without coercion. Many begin their journey moved by the thrill of the first touch. But they stop when emotion softens, thinking I have withdrawn from them. They do not realize that I do not call you to live on highs, but on the steady rhythm of a heart that knows how to trust. Emotion is the wind that opens the door, but obedience is the feet that cross its threshold. You will not always feel me as near as when I rescued you from the storm, but you will know I am near when you walk through the desert without turning back, because I already told you to be there. Unity is not agreement in moments of comfort, but steadfastness in the seasons when I am silent. When you choose to walk after me, even without trumpets or clear signs, you begin to live by the laws of life rather than by the vibrations of emotion. And then, one day, you discover what young souls do not understand. Obedience does not make you weak, it makes you whole. It does not take away freedom, it returns freedom from the snare of fleeting emotions. Like the roots of a tree beneath the dark earth, with no applause, with no praise calling its name. Yet its depth determines the shape of the canopy above. The silent obedience within you is the same. It creates the seasons of flowers the world mistakes as sudden. You do not need to blow a trumpet to begin, nor seek inspiration to continue. For once my will and your steps meet, you have stepped into the valley of life, where every step bears my imprint. When you begin to walk according to my will, obedience ceases to be a single act and becomes a rhythm woven into your life. At that stage, you no longer ask each day where to go or what to do, because your soul has learned how to move in my cadence. Like a rower who knows how to harmonize the oar with the pulse of the stream, unity is not a season of the mind, but the firm foundation that keeps you from collapsing when emotions change. Those who seek feeling will only move when their inner fire flares, but those who live in my cadence walk when the sky is silent, when the fields show no signs, when the river only whispers at its bed. Perseverance is not forcing yourself to stand strong, but the certainty born from rooting yourself in the source unseen by human eyes. Like the roots anchored deep in the earth, the spiritual life is not nourished by fleeting sunlight on the surface, but by the silent nutrients beneath. There are souls who walk only when they feel I am near, but stop when that feeling fades, thinking I have left. They do not see that my rhythm does not change with storms, only humans change with moods. When you live in my cadence, you do not wait for emotion to urge you before acting. You act because I have spoken beforehand. Perseverance is born where you no longer need cheers, nor sudden bursts of light for comfort. You walk like a seed beneath the soil, trusting warmth will arrive even while clouds conceal the sun. You do not need to measure each hour to see whether the light grows closer or draws away. The life within sets its own laws, and you only need to merge yourself with them, not wrestle against them. When you live in my rhythm, every step becomes peaceful, even if the outer winds stir, because you know the rock beneath your feet does not change. Many assume perseverance is gritting your teeth and enduring, but true perseverance comes from the tranquility of a soul that understands I am working even when no one sees. They think they must maintain the fire of the beginning to preserve the blaze that awakened them. But fire in a storm and fire in the hearth of a home are not the same. The storm flares emotion, but the hearth quietly warms each meal, each day of life. Unity with me makes you seek fewer grand revelations and begin to cherish each small step, because that small step in my cadence forms the whole journey. What is great is not the storm I calm, but the rhythm you hold after the storm, where you continue onward even when there is no applause. When you live in my rhythm, you will see that change does not unfold in noise. It is like a river carving deeper into the earth, little by little, not like a roaring waterfall. The one standing on the bank only sees gentle water. But beneath, the soil is shifting and the riverbed is reshaping. I work within you the same way, quietly, steadily, without demanding instant visibility. You do not need to prove yourself. You simply allow my flow to enter the places where you once resisted. Unity does not happen in a single moment, but is woven from countless small steps when you keep my word as your compass, even when nothing around you has changed. That is how a soul becomes stable, not by the surface, but by depth. Eventually, the time comes when you understand that perseverance is not you struggling to survive in the dark, but you becoming so accustomed to my quiet workings that light becomes natural, like an ancient tree that does not wait for heavy rains to live. You learn to draw life from ordinary days, like a hidden spring that asks for no recognition. You learn to let your actions become worship, to let each step be a confession that I know your path. And when you reach that point, emotion is no longer the helm, only the breeze gliding over the water. You do not need to feel me to know I am leading. You only need to live in my rhythm that is unity beyond every season. There are steps that reason has not yet explained, but the soul already understands what must be done. This is where obedience reveals its nature. You walk before seeing the proof, not because you are reckless, but because you know I am the one guiding. When you walk according to what I speak, you do not walk based on what the eyes see, but on the word that touched the depth of your being, like someone walking on a dark wooden floor, unable to see the end of the corridor, yet still placing a gentle foot forward without retreat, because each fiber beneath is held by an invisible structure. Obedience does not require you to see the entire journey. It only requires you to know you do not walk alone. Each step that seems small shakes the unseen realm, where I have already laid the foundation before you arrived. That walk becomes an unspoken declaration I trust. Obedience does not wait for the door to open before stepping in. Obedience is when you place your hand on the handle, even before you hear the click of the lock. Many souls want me to give them clear signs, a light in the darkness, affirmation from people, a promise painted in miracles. But if a miracle is defined by proof, then faith has no room to live. The sower does not wait to see the bud before sowing. He sows because he believes in the season. In the moment the seed falls into the soil, no one sees the future. No one sees the grain of wheat. No one can predict the harvest. Yet the sower still walks, still releases each seed into the field, because he trusts that the life hidden in the seed will meet the light at the appointed time. You do not need to see tomorrow in order to step into today. You only need to keep the conviction that my word never falls to the ground like a useless seed. There are steps that make you tremble because they move against what is familiar, against the path the world says is safe. But obedience does not require you to eliminate fear. It only requires that fear does not hold the wheel. You may be hesitant, you may be slow, but as long as you place your foot in my direction, the light will gradually appear. I do not ask you to run. I only ask you to move forward. The dark wooden floor beneath your feet does not stay firm because you grasp its structure. It stands firm because I have laid it down. You do not need to analyze every tremor in the floor, nor estimate the strength of each plank, because what determines the journey is not the material, but the one who already knows where you are going. Obedience is not blindness. Obedience is clarity when you choose to set the weight of your heart upon the foundation I have established. Do not wait until your eyes see to walk, for if you wait, you will always remain at the threshold. The door only opens when you come close enough for your hand to touch it, like the sower scattering each seed beneath an unpromising sky. Obedience begins when the soul places its hope in what is unseen. Maybe tomorrow it will rain. Maybe the soil will be dry. Maybe the birds will come, but the sower does not build the season on risk, but on the truth that life has already been placed in the seed from the beginning. I have placed life in you in the same way, not so that you wait for perfect circumstances, but so that you walk even before you see the flower bloom. You do not need to know how I cause the sprout to rise from the earth. I only need you to sow, and I will do the rest. One day, when you look back, you will understand that obedience is not born from understanding. Understanding is born from obedience. The paths that once looked like walls before you will gradually become passageways, not because their nature has changed, but because your steps have opened a new angle of sight. Like a person walking across a dark wooden floor, no one sees the whole shape of the room until reaching the end. So it is with you. Only by walking do you realize that I have prepared each plank for you to stand upon. Let faith lead you beyond the narrow vision of the eyes. For I do not call you according to what you see. I call you according to what I have ordained. And when you respond, the door will not only open before you, but will open within you, where faith forms the strength for you to take the next step once more. There are days when you believe that the longer, more intense, and more tearful your prayers are, the stronger your spiritual power becomes. You think that the length of your words will shake the heavens, that the greater the urgency, the closer the miracle. But truth is quieter, deeper, and contrary to what an unseasoned soul often assumes, a prolonged prayer is merely the echo of anxiety left unplaced upon me. When fear still sits at the center, prayer becomes a loop of unrest, not a flow of trust. You speak much not because you are closer to me, but because you have not yet dared to release what you fear losing. That length is not a wrongness in itself, but it reveals the place where the heart has yet to find rest. And I do not condemn that. I only want you to understand that the strength of prayer does not lie in the number of words, but in the source on which you rest your heart. When your heart leans upon fear, a prayer may be loud but remains hollow. But when your spirit leans upon me, even a breath is enough to stir the invisible realm. Some souls tremble in the night, repeating the same request over and over, as if trying to hold a door from closing or grasp the fading edge of light. They imagine that if they speak enough, I will hear them more clearly, but I am not hard of hearing. I am not indifferent. I do not sleep through the words you utter. I listen from the deepest point of the heart, not from the number of repetitions. When prayer stands on worry, it is like someone knocking on a door, not because they trust the one inside will answer, but because they fear that if they stop knocking, the darkness will swallow them. I know that fear. I see that confusion. But I call you to something deeper, the rest found in me. When you allow your heart to settle, you will realize that I answer not through volume, but through the unity between your faith and my voice, a union that anxiety cannot create, but faith can awaken. You once believed that a strong prayer is one that pours out like a flood full of emotion, full of pleading, full of imagined outcomes you want me to fulfill. But a truly strong prayer is the one that causes your soul to shift direction. It is the prayer that turns your gaze away from fear and onto me, the prayer that loosens the clenched fist and opens the palm, the prayer in which anxiety ceases to be the center, and trust begins to speak. When you pray in fear, you are trying to persuade me, but when you pray in trust, you place yourself within my movement. Length does not change destiny, surrender does. Anxiety makes you speak endlessly about what you fear. Faith makes you quiet enough to hear what I am saying. And the very moment your heart shifts from the echo of fear to the awakening of trust, that is when prayer touches heaven. I do not demand that you pray briefly. I only want you to pray truly. I do not need you to reduce your words. I need you to shift your center. I do not forbid you from expressing your emotions. I only want you to place them in their proper place, at my feet, not on the throne of control. When you pray from anxiety, You fear that if you stop speaking, the miracle will drift away. But when you pray from trust, you know that even in your silence, the miracle is already in motion, because it does not arise from your panic, but from my faithfulness. You do not need more words for me to hear. You need more faith to stand firm. The strongest prayer is not the one repeated endlessly, but the one born from the conviction that I do not change. Even as the seasons shift, even as circumstances tremble, even when you have not yet seen anything change. When you pray to persuade me, your soul is saying that I am not good enough, that I only act when reminded, that I only grant blessings when you present the right reasoning or the proper intensity of emotion. Fear makes prayer a negotiation, as though I am a stranger who needs explanations to understand you. You tell me things I already know, as though I entered your life only today and have never seen the tears you have shed through the years. I hear you repeat your wishes, but beneath them is the silent whisper, I do not believe you will act unless I pressure you. When your soul stands before me as a beggar instead of one who surrenders, it becomes like a child arguing with the sun that it must rise earlier because its world needs light immediately. The sun does not need persuasion, it only needs its appointed hour. In the same way, I do not require elaborate arguments to grant goodness. I know what you need before you ask. And when you pray to convince me, you only prove that you do not trust. I knew your sigh long before the night arrived. I do not blame you for weakness, but I want you to see, deeper prayer can be the voice of faith, but it can also be the echo of doubt dressed in the robe of hope. Many souls believe that if they emphasize details, if they present more context, more reasons, I will feel moved the way human beings are touched by tragic stories. They do not realize that I do not make decisions based on emotion, but based on my nature, and that nature is goodness. You cannot make me love you more with cries of desperation, just as you cannot make me turn away simply because you speak little. I do not measure the length of a petition to determine the worth of a soul. When you try to persuade me, you place your soul in a threatened position, where you believe that if you do not plead enough, I will overlook you. In that moment, prayer is no longer an act of trust, but becomes a battle to seize control. You may not see it, but deep within you are saying, if I do not build fences around what I ask, you will not act. I see you tense like a farmer guarding his rice field before the rain, thinking that if you do not stand under the sky and beg for every drop, the harvest will die. But rain does not come because of a calling voice. Rain comes because of the laws of operation I set from the beginning. You do not awaken life through panic, but through unity with what I have spoken from eternity. When you pray to persuade me, you do not realize that you are placing yourself in the position of the manager, and me as merely the executor. You draw the plan, present each option, and expect me to sign at the bottom of the page as one who consents to your strategy. I do not mock you for doing so. I simply ache when I see that you do not trust that I knew you before you knew yourself. Some prayers resemble requests meant to correct reality, as though I could see only the surface and needed you to provide deeper data so I could act correctly. But faith is not presentation. Faith is surrender. Those who know me do not need to argue. Those who know me simply say, you lead me, and what you do is good. You may still pour out your heart. You may still express your needs. But you must be careful that those words do not become an attempt to convince me that you alone know what is best. The more anxious your prayer becomes, the more you believe that I might be wrong or late. But when you trust that I am the source, prayer becomes gentle, for it no longer aims to change me, but to place you in the right posture. When you pray to persuade, your heart is at the center. When you pray to surrender, I am at the center. And true prayer only takes place in the space where I am at that center. Doubt does not always scream. Sometimes it hides within the most fluent petitions. You may say, "Please do this because," and the truth lies behind the ellipsis. "I am not sure," you will act, if I do not explain it well. You believe that emphasizing reasons can move me, as though I were a ruler, persuaded by the urgency of subjects. But I am not a king of fickleness. I am the Lord of provision. Every line of your timeline has already been seen by me before you stepped into it. You still plead. But you forget that some prayers are nothing more than the protests of a soul not yet ready to trust. I know what you need before you ask. Matthew 6:8 is not mere comfort. It is a declaration of my nature. I do not wait for you to cry out before I recognize your lack. I have seen the fractures in your sleep. The nights you tell no one. You do not need to dig through memories to make me feel compassion. When you are silent is often when I know you most clearly. But you think that if you stop speaking, I will stop acting. You do not know that silence may be the deepest act of trust, the place where you place the final decision in my hands. Let me help you understand this prayer is not meant to revise my will, but to unite your heart with it. I do not change my nature because you speak longer, cry harder, or describe more clearly. I change you. I bend the tense chords within your heart, not to dismiss your needs, but to remind you that fear is not the realm where I operate. You may pray from your depths. You may pour your exhaustion upon me. You may speak your greatest pain. But be careful that those words do not become an attempt to prove that I am not good enough unless pressured. You do not need to convince me that you deserve to be heard. I have listened before you formed the sentence. You do not need to convince me that the time has come. I have seen the time long before you felt urgency. I do not need to be persuaded to love. I am love. And when you understand this, your prayer will return to its most primordial form. Do what you have ordained and make my heart steady enough to follow. There are souls who beg for miracles like the thirsty, looking to the sky, holding out their hands for a random rain, yet stand before a deep well beside them and never bend down. Petitioning instead of obeying is an inversion of order. You seek the miracle instead of seeking the source of miracles. When your heart sets its aim on what you want to see rather than on the one who creates what you seek, you turn prayer into a ritual of luck, a form of spiritual gambling, rather than a homecoming, an act of placing your life into my design. Some say, "Let me see the results so I may believe," and fail to see how this very sentence reveals the inversion they wait for, sight, to replace the trust that should be leading them. But my child, faith is not the reward after the miracle. Faith is the path that opens the miracle at the time I have appointed, not at the time anxiety sketches in its fear. When you use prayer to replace surrender, your soul is trying to control through language. You attempt to change reality without changing your position within that reality. You stand beside my deep well, the source that has guided generations, yet draw water from passing rain because you want what is visible, measurable, graspable. A rain may quench once, but the well sustains a lifetime. A miracle may satisfy you for a moment, but unity with me transforms you from within. When you plead only to obtain a result, you are not seeking me, you are seeking a solution. I hear that prayer. I understand your thirst, but I call you deeper to the place where you do not merely drink to survive, but learn to belong to the source. You want me to intervene on the surface, but you do not want me to touch the roots. You want healing, but not transformation. You want the door opened, but not the lesson of walking through it. When petition replaces obedience, prayer becomes a subtle command. Do this so I will not have to learn anything more. But I am not the servant of human desires. I am the source of life. Prayer brings you to the door, but obedience brings you inside. Many stand endlessly at the gate of heaven because they think that if they knock long enough, I will open according to their will. But the door does not open because of volume. It opens when the heart is willing to walk the path I call. You may speak thousands of words and never move anywhere. For what I wait for is not sound, but the movement of the soul. I know you are afraid. I know you see time slipping away. See opportunities you believe have vanished. See others moving faster than you. That fear makes you beg for miracles like someone in panic hunting for an antidote. But my beloved, miracles are not the means I use to soothe your emotions. Miracles are the natural result of a heart aligned with my will. The one who waits for rain will live with a dependent soul, sometimes nourished, sometimes dry, sometimes hopeful, sometimes despairing. But the one who searches for the well will know peace, even in drought. To pray in place of obedience turns you into a victim of circumstance, but obedience makes you a companion to me along the path that I, myself, lead. I do not want you to live by sudden flashes of brilliance. I want you to live in the steady light I have placed within. There are those who beg me to break their chains, yet refuse to loosen the final clasp that binds them. There are those who ask me to open doors, yet lock their hearts shut out of caution. They want the miracle to change their surroundings, but do not want the miracle to change themselves. Prayer for such a purpose is like scooping rainwater only to pour it into the well, a futile attempt to create life in the place where I have already placed the source. You pray because you hope I will act faster, stronger, more clearly. But sometimes what I am doing lies outside the realm of what eyes can see. Obedience does not always come with a glowing halo. It is like the movement of groundwater unseen, unboastful, yet powerful enough to split stone and carve a path beneath the earth. Prayer is only the call. Obedience is the door. When you seek miracles without seeking the source, you unintentionally turn me into a tool for solving problems rather than the one who leads you through life. You ask me, why has the miracle not come yet, I ask you? Why have you not come to me? Miracles were never meant to become the center. I am the center. Miracles are the result, not the goal. The one who lives by miracles will always need more, for miracles satisfy only for a moment. The one who lives by the source will not run dry, for the source does not come from the outside but from union. And when you understand this, you will see that prayer is no longer a method of acquiring what you desire, but becomes the heartbeat that aligns with mine. You cry out not to change me, but to allow me to change you. There are souls who seek me in noise, in the chaos of hurried prayers, in the urgency of pleas that sound as if they wish to shake the heavens. They think the louder they shout, the closer I come, the more they panic, the more I am forced to act. But they do not understand that I speak within the silence of the soul, not in the volume of fear. When you flood your mind with inner noise, when your heart surges with anxiety, you create a mist that obscures my guidance. I am still there, still present, still patient, but you cannot hear me beneath the noise of yourself. Like the wind at night, soft yet strong enough to guide the forest leaves, my instruction does not come as thunder or ringing bells. It comes as a gentle breath gliding across a soul willing to be still. Fear always demands volume, but faith needs only presence. I once came to Elijah, not in the strong wind, not in the fire, not in the earthquake. I came in the whisper, a reminder that my power is not found in spectacle, but in the peace that causes the universe to grow quiet. You do not need to shout for me to hear. I have heard you before your words ever formed. You do not need to build emotional battlegrounds for me to see. I have seen you before the first tear fell. But when your soul is crowded with noise, it is not that I do not speak, it is that you are not still enough to perceive that my voice has already slipped into the deepest place within. Whoever walks in darkness but pauses to listen to the wind knows that the path is not only guided by light, but also by the subtle movements of things unseen. You have grown accustomed to waiting for grand signs, clear evidence, powerful confirmations. Yet you forget that I am the one who can turn the heart with a breath. Fear always demands explanations. Faith requires only relationship. When you seek me through worry, your prayer becomes like frantic knocking on a door you fear will close. But when you seek me in calm, prayer becomes an opening not for me to step into your life, but for you to step into the presence I have already prepared. You think spiritual strength comes from tension, from struggle, from stretching emotion to drag me into your circumstances. But I have never been dragged to where you stand. It is you who must step into where I already am. Fear pushes your ears outward, hoping to catch thunder. Stillness bends your head inward, where the whisper has long been speaking. You cannot hear me when your soul roars in panic, just as you cannot hear the wind if you run through the forest at night. Understand, this silence is not the absence of action. Silence is where my action begins. Just as still waters reflect the sky, only a quiet soul reflects my word. You once asked, "Why do you not answer?" But I answered in the moment you stopped asking and simply breathed. You once complained, "Why do you not guide?" But I guided when you left behind the noise of worry to hear me redirect with peace. I do not speak in the violent winds of emotion. I speak in the rhythm of the Spirit's wind, where a single touch is enough to turn a leaf. You want me to speak like thunder, but I choose to speak like the breeze, not because I want to be difficult, but because only in stillness can the heart truly change. The one who hears my voice is not the one who demands answers, but the one who stops wrestling with fear. Therefore, do not seek me in the storms of your soul. Do not force me to speak amid the clamor of anxiety. When you run in darkness, you cannot hear the wind that leads. Only when you stop does it brush your cheek and say, "Go this way." I speak not to make you tremble, but to make you steady. I do not speak to the soul that shouts, but to the soul that lowers its voice. If you want to understand your next step, do not increase your prayers, decrease your inner noise. Let your heart settle like the forest after a storm, where each leaf learns to stand still to hear the wind. In that moment, you will realize I was never silent, only fear spoke too loudly. There are souls who hear my word and immediately assume I want to take away their freedom, seize the steering wheel of their life, or turn them into dependent beings with no power to choose. But you do not understand that my instruction is not to control you, it is to free you from your own control. As long as you believe you must manage everything alone, hold every relationship in place, preserve every plan through your own effort, your heart will live in tension like a swimmer thrashing in the sea. The novice swimmer believes that the more they strike, the more they resist the water, the more they flail, the more they will survive. Yet, it is that resistance that exhausts the limbs, fractures the breath, and drags the body downward. The relaxed swimmer knows the water was made to lift. They loosen the body, open their palms, let themselves float gently on the surface. So it is with the spiritual life. When you resist my voice out of fear of losing control, you sink under the weight of yourself. But when you lean into my word, that voice lifts you as the water embraces the one who knows how to release. I do not speak to force you into a path I choose merely to display power. I speak to lead you out of the labyrinths you have built for yourself. How many times have you asked me to open a door, yet kept the key in your hand? You knock incessantly, urging me to act. But when I hand you my key, you refuse it because it does not fit the lock you designed. You want me to bend reality to your will, to turn hardship into a smooth road, to twist time so you do not have to confront your own imperfection. But my word is not an escort of privilege for your personal preference. It is light shining through a narrow passage that only those willing to humble themselves can walk through. When I call you to the other shore, it is not because I want you to move like one oppressed by command. But because I see that the water you are drinking from here is nothing but dry sand, I speak not to make you dependent on signs, but to lead you out of dependence on yourself. True trust is not a state you manufacture with your willpower. It is like a lock that opens only when the right key is inserted. You may strike the door with force, tear at the handle, or try hundreds of keys. But if the key is wrong, the door will not move. I do not soften the door because you are exhausted. I hand you the key because I know the door must be opened by correctness, not impatience. My word is that key. It does not coerce you. It gives you the authority to step through. Many people twist the lock of their lives with emotion, try to open the door of their future with fear, turn the bolt with the pressure of time, and when none of it works, they assume I have abandoned them. But child, I do not abandon. I wait for you to release the key you forged from anxiety, woundedness, and memory, so you may receive the key I have forged in the fire of eternal wisdom. You once believed that surrendering to my will meant losing control, that it would place you in a position of weakness, but sometimes it is precisely control that becomes the net that pulls you under. A swimmer does not die because of the water, they die because they thrash. My word does not come to tighten around you, but to loosen your own grip from your throat. I see you straining in situations that have far exceeded your capacity. I see you justify to yourself that if you try a bit harder, if you maneuver cleverly enough, if you never let go, you will keep everything intact. I speak to tell you that you do not need to carry responsibilities beyond your reach. Where you feel weak, I do not add weight. I extend my hand to lift you above the surface. Liberation arrives when you know how to let go at the right moment, like a leaf releasing itself from the branch in its season light, whole, unbroken. And when you experience my word this way, you will see that I never call you into dependence. I call you into freedom, freedom from the obsession with being right, from the fear of being wrong, from the pressure of always having to be strong. I know you think that if you do not control every step, you will fail. But you have not yet understood that there are paths only formed when your hands leave the wheel. I lead you by light, not by shackles. I open doors with keys, not with blows. I lift you from the water, not with a shout, but with a calmness that makes you stop struggling. Therefore, let my word free you from yourself before you ask me to resolve everything around you. When you walk into obedience, you do not lose ownership over your life. You simply hand the steering wheel to the one who sees the roads your eyes cannot. When I speak, you do not need full understanding. You only need the readiness to stand up. How many times have you delayed because you could not see the entire road? Like someone standing before the first step and demanding to see the whole mountain range behind it before lifting their foot. But the spiritual journey does not operate by the light of the intellect. It moves by the cadence of my word. If you demand complete understanding before you ever step forward, you will remain rooted where fear lives. For everything I lead you into surpasses the explanations human eyes can comprehend. Understanding has its value, but understanding only opens the door once you have already entered. Obedience itself is what carves the way, like a traveler walking through mist, unable to see the end of the slope yet still moving, one step at a time. Knowing the road does not end in nothingness, my word never calls you into futility. There are moments when you wait for me to explain, and then explain again, and then again, as though I must sign a contract before you dare to move. You wait for enough data, enough certainty, enough proof to shield yourself from the possibility of disappointment. Yet you do not notice that the very act of waiting for sufficient explanation has already become the chain that exhausts your soul. Understanding comes after obedience, not before. Like a sprout pushing above the dark soil, it does not question the spring, It simply rises because the life within it declares the time has come. I do not speak to test you. I speak to lift you from the slumber of self-doubt. If you wait for confidence to act, you may never move. But if you act because I have spoken, that very step will give strength to your soul. Remember that faith is not born from explanation, it is born from response. The one who seeks understanding will endlessly chase reasons. The one who obeys becomes the evidence. When I called Abraham, you did not see me hand him a map or a schedule. I simply said, "Go." And it was the stepping that made the story, not the analysis. You may read my words endlessly, ponder each sentence, arrange your reasoning meticulously, but if you never move, your spiritual knowledge becomes a painted sky, vast in imagination, yet carrying you nowhere. What I require of you is not perfect comprehension, but the acceptance. You know the way, and I am willing to rise. Do not think your preparation must be perfect before I can use you. Like someone learning to swim, you do not need to fully understand water's effect on the body. You only need to let the body float. A trembling step into the water will teach you more than 1,000 pages of theory. When I speak, you do not need to know every reason. You only need to allow your heart to move away from its familiar shore. The very act of standing up is the declaration of faith. You are not fleeing from truth, you are walking toward it. Even if you do not yet know the story, waiting behind the door. I do not speak to measure your intellect. I speak to bring you to a place unseen by the eyes but prepared by destiny. I do not measure you by results. I measure you by willingness. You have grown accustomed to the world's way of valuing worth, performance, achievement, milestones, things that can be counted, displayed, or applauded. Therefore, whenever I call you to step forward, your first questions are, if I do this, what will the outcome be? Will I succeed? Will I be affirmed? Will I prove myself worthy? But child, results are seasons. Willingness is the seed. The first rain of the season does not need to meet a quota to soften the earth. It only needs to arrive at the right moment. Even a gentle rain is enough to awaken layers of soil, long parched. Likewise, you do not need to prove accomplishment before you move. You only need to be willing. From that willingness, I plant in you things unseen: endurance, maturity, gratitude, and a trust that roots itself in me rather than in achievement. The world applauds those with dazzling results, but heaven sees the one who stood up in the darkness without demanding light before their eyes. You believed I wait for you to succeed before loving you, but I loved you even when you did not yet know your own name. You thought I praise you when you achieved something great, but I comforted you in the days when you had just enough strength to breathe. I do not place my focus on what you accomplish. I place it on what you are willing to surrender. When you walk forward, even if the steps are small, trembling, unseen by anyone, I still see. The first leaf does not fall to persuade autumn. It does not cry out, I am strong enough to open the season. It simply falls because the inner moment has arrived. And that very falling ignites the shift of a whole season. Your willingness is the same, not to prove, but to cooperate with what I have ordained. You have sat before me many times with a heavy heart, thinking you failed, thinking you have not done enough, thinking you have wasted opportunities. But you do not know that I see you in every moment when you chose one small action over abandoning everything. I see the nights you prayed not to replace me, but simply to ask me to lift the burden from your shoulders. I see each time you reached beyond your safe zone, not to conquer the world, but just so you would not keep running away. I do not collect your achievements. I look at the movement of your soul. You think I ask what have you done, but I truly ask how willing are you to let me work within you, for willingness is not the demand of the strong, but the gift of those who know how to open themselves. When you live by the standards of the world, results are like a distorted mirror. They magnify failures and diminish efforts. But I do not reflect your soul through that mirror. I reflect it through the light of my will, where a small step is worth more than a gust of ambition. A child learning to walk does not need to run. It only needs the courage to release its grip from the edge of the chair. I do not look at the child and record it cannot run yet. It has failed. I say, it is learning to trust its own feet. And I look at you the same way. I know every stretch of road you have traveled. Every time you fell. Every time you rose quietly with no witness. I know what you think about yourself. But I do not see you through that lens. I see you through the lens of the one who formed you, the one who knows you will mature through your slowest steps. Do not fear beginning simply because you are uncertain. Do not delay getting up just because you cannot see the whole road. I do not love you less when you are weak, and I do not love you more when you are strong. I love you because I am who I am. I work in you because you are mine, not because you have met the standards. You need only the willingness to let me enter the land you believe is the most barren in you. When you open that door, I do not demand that you present a plan. I do not demand that you promise success. I do not demand that you answer every question. I only need you to say, I am here, and I no longer want to keep control. That willingness is the place where a new season opens, not by pressure, but by the light I sow into you. True obedience at the right time is an act of humility, not, I am worthy. But I acknowledge, when the soul still believes obedience is a reward for the moral, the strong, the elite, you will always stand before my word like someone hoping to be chosen, constantly comparing, measuring, wondering whether you are enough. But obedience does not arise from achievement. It arises from recognition of who I am, recognition of where my voice comes from, recognition that it is not your strength that creates the rhythm of life, but that I am the source of every movement. A student of the violin does not produce sound because they are a prodigy from the beginning. They produce sound because they place the finger on the right string. Each note does not come from display but from submitting to the principle of the instrument. Obedience is the same when you place your soul on my word. Life flows forth not because you excel, but because you place yourself within the orbit I have set. There are souls who plead for miracles before they learn humility, like those who want a symphony without accepting the first trembling sound. They say, use me, yet their hearts still want to keep control, still want to choose the timing, still want to dictate the method. They want me to prove their worth so they will not have to stand in smallness. But my child, true obedience at the right time is not lowering yourself to redeem dignity. It is returning to the sacred reality that I have already provided, that everything I speak places you where the light will come. When the angel delivered the message, Mary did not say, prove I am worthy. She simply said, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word. No argument, no negotiation, no attempt at preserving her position. That humility did not need a drum, did not need praise, did not need to calculate the future. It only needed to know who was speaking and who must answer. Many think humility is making oneself smaller, denying one's own worth, bowing out of fear. But true humility is acknowledging that your soul is not the sun of the world, that you are not the center of a grand design. You are simply the place where I plant the seed so my life may flow. Humility does not diminish you. It frees you from having to prove your value every day. The one who presses the finger on the right string does not need to boast of talent. The sound speaks for itself. You do not need to say, I am worthy of being chosen. You only need to answer, I recognize the one who calls. Then, my word will cease to be a pressure forcing you into heroism. It becomes the gentle cadence that leads you to the place you were appointed to stand. Not because you are strong enough, but because I am great enough. You still think I choose perfect hearts. But I choose the hearts that know how to open. I do not need you to untangle every knot in your life before you say yes. I do not require you to understand the ending of the story before you write the first line. I only ask, are you willing to let me place my finger upon the strings of your life? Are you willing for sound to emerge from that union? Even if it is not the music you had imagined, when you wait until you are worthy, you will delay forever. For the standards you set will always shift. But when you recognize, you step into my word, like water flowing down the valley without force, without competition, simply following the gravity of grace. And when you enter in that way, your life no longer needs to prove anything. It only needs to resonate. True obedience in its proper moment is not you stretching to achieve something grand. It is you opening your heart so something grand can be done within you. The world praises loud actions, performances, victories, thunderous moments. I seek the unseen moments when you move from resistance to acceptance, from reasoning to listening, from pride to recognition. A violin note placed on the right string may not be perfect, but it becomes the beginning of an entire composition. A humble yes may not change the world instantly, but it opens the path heaven has long awaited. You think I speak to test your quality. I speak to free you from the need to prove yourself. When you obey at the right moment, you are not saying, I am good enough. You are saying, you are good enough for me to place my life in your hands. And that very declaration makes the realm of death tremble. For it does not exalt your strength, it exalts the source of life. Obedience is not a spring of force, but a steadiness for me to use. Many souls believe obedience is like a leap, a surge forward, a blazing moment that proves determination. They want to turn obedience into a radiant milestone, a jump from the ground, a striking blow against the darkness, a dramatic turn that earns applause. But, my child, obedience is not the thunder that opens a rainstorm. It is like the soil quietly drinking each drop of water, silent, steady, unpretentious. And it is that steadiness that unlocks life. I do not use the gust that sweeps through and disappears. I use the layers of wind that move consistently, day after day, step by step, breath by breath. Obedience is endurance, not because you are prominent, but because you stand in the right place so that I can work through you. You will come to see that what shakes the gates of death is not a single moment of force, but the stability of a heart that remains in my will, whether emotions rise or fall, whether circumstances shift or stagnate. In the eyes of the world, endurance is dull. It lacks glamour, lacks stories to tell, lacks the feeling of breakthrough. But in my eyes, endurance is the sign of a soul that has learned to trust me more than itself. The sprinter may rouse the cheering crowds, but the long-distance runner reaches the finish line. Obedience is like an underground river. It makes no sound. It has no spotlight. It is not praised in speeches. Yet it gradually carves through the hard rock that those who rely on sight think is impenetrable. You once asked me, why have I not seen the miracle? But miracles do not come to stir your emotions. They come when you stand steady enough to bear them. The farmer does not build a harvest with a leap. He builds it with slow, continuous, trusting days. Even when the sky is gray and the soil is hard, obedience is the same, not to create noise, but to nourish deep roots. Many people assume I seek those who burn brilliantly. They wait until they are strong enough to move, inspired enough to obey, armed with enough momentum to do what I command. But I do not wait for you to become a firework. I seek hearts willing to remain, willing to stand in the darkness, willing to kindle a small light each day. You may think I use the grandest moments, but the history of the soul is built from countless small, even steps. Each day you place my will above your own. A new layer of earth is opened. Each time you hold on to faith without seeing results, a new spring of water is uncovered. Every moment you abandon haste, fear, comparison, and simply say, "You lead, I follow." Your roots drive deeper into the place where I have placed life. Obedience does not make you powerful, it makes you ready. A skilled craftsman does not need a bigger hammer, he needs a steady anvil on which to lay the blade. I do not need you to leap high for me to use you. I need you to stand firm so I can place what I desire in your hand. You think I will work in you when you reach a point of ecstasy, but I often choose the moments when you feel nothing, when the soul is quiet, when the hands do not tremble with emotion, when the heart no longer seeks reward, only rests in goodwill. That stability does not come from calm circumstances, but from knowing how to anchor yourself in me. When I look for soil to sow, I do not search for the radiant meadow, I seek the deep earth. When I look for a soul to entrust with a mission, I do not seek the roar of a crowd, I seek a place of abiding. And when you understand this, you will stop comparing yourself with souls who appear to move faster. You will stop asking, "Why have I not changed dramatically?" and begin to ask, "Am I standing in the right place for you to work?" I do not want you to burn yourself up to prove capability. I want you to become a tree rooted deep enough to welcome the wind without being broken. When obedience becomes steadiness, you no longer need to chase inspiration. Inspiration will seek you. You no longer need to manufacture strength. Strength will flow into you. You no longer need to pursue miracles. Miracles will find the one who is calm enough to carry them without losing themselves. When you have learned to stand firm in obedience, the journey does not end. It is only the beginning of maturity. Steadiness is not the destination, but the ground on which I place the next seed. From stability and obedience, your soul enters the capacity to become an instrument, where miracles are no longer the goal you pursue, but the natural result of being held by me. Like an instrument resting in the maker's hand, the instrument does not ask where its music will be heard, nor argue about the size of the hall. It simply remains still as the artist touches the strings, and sound is born. Thus, the mature soul does not seek to impress, does not strive to create light, does not force itself to be strong. It simply places itself in my hand. In that placement, the spiritual current begins to flow without the need for proof, like a river moving through a valley, never trying to become an ocean, simply doing what it was created to do, bring life to the dry places. There are times when you think that, for me to use you, you must prepare more, refine more skills, or reach some level of perfection. You look at yourself and see lack, see unremoved shadows, see limits unbroken. You imagine I place my hand only on souls polished, sealed, uncracked. But my child, in my hand, an unglazed clay vessel is more valuable than a golden one that refuses to open its lid. I do not choose you because of perfection. I choose you because of willingness. When you stand steady in obedience, you no longer tremble before the gaze of the world. You no longer hunt for affirmation from outside. You become like humble soil that has absorbed enough of the first rains, ready to welcome tender roots, not to display beauty, but to grow. Such a soul does not compete in the spiritual race, does not look left or right to see who is faster. It only looks upward to see me touching it. Little by little, in silence. Maturity does not reveal itself in bursts of sound. It reveals itself in the way you are no longer pulled by the waves of your own emotions. The unseasoned wait for miracles to believe. The mature believe and then see miracles. When my hand works through such a soul, they do not try to perform miracles. They simply follow the guidance. And the miracle reveals itself like a flower blooming in season. I do not need them to hurl themselves into the light. I bring the light through them. Just as a lamp does not produce fire by itself, it only bears fire from its source. One who has matured in me does not ask, "How can I create great things?" but asks, "Where must I stand so that your light may be shared?" And when that question changes, they begin to walk into the true essence of a spiritual instrument, not to create power, but to transmit the power that comes from me. Remember that an instrument does not stand out because of its material, but because of the hand that holds it. A craftsman can create a masterpiece from an ordinary piece of wood, so long as it is willing to be carved. I am the same. I do not need you to become hardened steel or polished marble for me to use. I need you soft enough to be reshaped. Stability and obedience is the state of a soul that no longer convulses from fear, no longer trembles from self-will, no longer panics because of outcomes. You become pliant clay in the hands of the potter, asking no questions about the final form, making no guesses about the purpose, simply letting me turn, press, and touch. And in that touch, my operation no longer depends on external conditions, but becomes an inner disposition within you. People look at the ceramic and call it a work of art. I look at the stillness within the molding process and call it obedience. When the soul reaches that depth, a miracle is no longer the shock of the impossible. It becomes the natural result of a life aligned with my will. You no longer seek explosions to prove my presence. You carry that presence in every step. I do not need you to chase signs in order to confirm me. I place the sign within you as a quiet rhythm, like rice growing day by day, unheard yet seen by all when the season arrives. When you place yourself in my hands, you no longer need to ask, "When will the miracle appear?" because the miracle has already begun the moment you allow yourself to be led, not the moment you see the result. And in such a way, you do not merely witness my work outside of you. You become a testimony to what I am doing within your own soul. When the soul understands it is an instrument, it no longer runs after a mission like one searching for a task to prove itself, nor does it treat mission as a flag to be raised in the public square. It acts within the mission like a tree rooted in soil, not to prove it has roots, but because the roots have become its instinct for survival. Every step, every choice, every word carries the weight of heaven, not because they are grand or spectacular, but because they are woven from my will. The unseasoned soul always asks, "What must I do to serve you?" The mature soul only whispers, "Let me live exactly where you have placed me." For when you are united with me, mission is no longer a list of tasks, but the air you breathe like a river does not struggle to flow downward. It only needs not to be blocked. There is a biblical story that illustrates this with subtle clarity. David tending sheep, not when he defeated Goliath, but when he was in the wilderness where no one applauded, no one praised, no one called his name. David did not act because of the mission. He acted within the mission. He defended the flock from the lion and the bear, not to prove his worth to anyone, but because that was the portion I gave him for that day. So when I sent him into battle, he did not need the king's armor, nor the strength of the crowd. He carried the experience of small responsibility, and from that, I wrought something great. People saw the moment Goliath fell. I saw the days David quietly lifted each stone beside the stream. The path of an instrument does not begin in the battlefield, but in the pasture where the soul learns to do small things in faithfulness. That faithfulness is the foundation of every miracle. When you act within the mission, you no longer seek inspiration to begin. You do not need glory to make a decision. You do not need a fierce wind to prove you are moving in the right direction. You simply step according to what I place before you today. Souls, still driven by ambition or praise, constantly waver. Is this God's will? Is it big enough? Worthy enough? Honorable enough? But the one united with me does not measure mission by scale. but by the density of my presence in each small thing. They understand that a flower blooms not because it wants to bloom, but because it is in the right season. A cistern fills not because it thirsts, but because it is placed beneath rain. Therefore, every ordinary step becomes a door I open. Every simple act becomes a point where heaven touches earth. Souls who live within the mission do not chase changing contexts, nor do they twist themselves according to worldly expectations. They become like an instrument in the hands of an artist producing no sound of its own, yet ready to resonate whenever I touch it. They do not need to stand on a stage. If I place them in a hidden corner, they fulfill my will just as faithfully as when I place them before a crowd. When I use them to lift a broken soul, they are the place from which I speak comfort. When I use them to awaken, they are the gentle knock I lay upon another mind. They do not ask, "What is my role?" They ask, "Where am I in your hand?" Mission is no longer something to do, but becomes a reality to live. When the soul matures, miracles are no longer supernatural events detached from life. Miracles become the climate of life. I no longer need to break the laws to convince you, because unity itself is already the evidence. You do not demand that I split the sea whenever you face obstacles. You keep walking, knowing the water will recede when I will it. You do not seek trumpets to begin. You know I walk before you. Mission, for such a soul, is no longer a page of history waiting to be written. It is the breath of each day, and each breath is enough to shake things you never knew you touched. When the soul has become an instrument, it no longer asks, "When will the miracle come?" because that question belongs to those outside the door. Those who think miracles are gifts I distribute on special days. The one united with me lives like land soaked with water. It does not summon rain. It does not flaunt its moisture. It simply allows life to seep into roots, into seeds sleeping beneath the soil. Miracle is no longer a goal you must pursue. It becomes the way I operate through you, even when you are unaware. Like a farmer who sows seeds, sleeps and wakes, and does not know how they sprout, only that the earth has done its work. When you allow yourself to become the soil, not the seed, I sow what I desire and nourish what I choose. You no longer have to prove you are being used by me your very life. Each calm step is living proof. Some demand radiant light each day to believe they are on the right path. But my light does not often arrive like an ocean ablaze. It comes like dew settling on the grass so small that no one notices, yet enough to soften the ground, enough to preserve the seedling through the night. When the soul has matured, it no longer asks me to do something remarkable to dispel doubt. It only asks that I stay close, and that presence is enough for it to walk. The unseasoned look to outcomes and emotions to validate themselves. The mature look to unity if I am walking ahead. They follow, not quickly, not loudly, not dramatically, like the moon pulling the tides without anyone hearing its command. That is how miracles work when you stop trying to control them. When you become an instrument, I no longer need to convince you with signs. You recognize that my hand is at work, even in the most ordinary things. A gentle word in a seemingly trivial conversation, a small decision that steers you away from a dangerous path, a quiet thought, full of peace, that leads you out of invisible traps of pride. You no longer demand to see so that you may believe, because belief itself has made you see. The world does not understand this and will ask, "What did you do?" But you know that it was I who acted, and you were merely the place where I set my step. Thus, the miraculous is no longer found in a blazing event. It is found in the way you live each day with an open heart, a listening soul, and a steady step. And at that level, you will no longer try to produce change in others. I do not use you as a spear to pierce them. I use you as a window through which my light passes. Those who stand before the window do not praise the window. they speak of the light. So it is with you. Those whom you touch will not see excellence in you. They will feel the peace in me. You do not need strength in order to lift someone. My gentleness through you is enough to pull them back from the depths, like the hands of a mother holding her child, not shaking the heavens but calming a trembling heart. I use you to place peace into souls that are quivering. The miracle in that moment is not what I do for you, but what I do through you, and you will know you have stepped into maturity when you no longer ask, "Why me?" but simply say, "If you will, please use me." Rising is not merely an action, it is a spiritual habit. A young soul believes that rising is the explosion of determination, the moment when emotion reaches its peak to break every delay. But the rising of those who have matured does not come from a sudden blaze. It comes like steady breathing, needing no audience, no drama, no proof. Breath does not ask whether someone sees it to begin its work. It simply moves in and moves out, as the natural rhythm of life. Those who have learned to walk with me understand that rising is not a storm within the soul, but a rhythm of peace each day. You open your eyes quietly, place your feet on the earth, and know that once again, you will follow me, not because you are certain of everything ahead, but because you are certain of the one who leads you. Many wait for inspiration before they rise, like someone waiting for the sunrise at midnight. They want strong emotion, clear assurances, a distinctive sign to legitimize each step. But the soul that has entered the habit of rising understands that light does not need to be theatrical to be light. You open your eyes each morning in calm, not because you have witnessed a miracle, but because you know that the breath you hold is already testimony. I am still here. You do not seek praise to get out of bed, nor do you need promises from men to face the day. The very fact that you refuse to give up is a spiritual declaration, not a declaration by voice, but by repeated choice. I will not let darkness determine my day. Rising becomes a habit when the heart no longer believes it must conquer everything at once. You do not rush into life with the ambition to shatter every chain before the sun sets. You move like one who has learned the rhythm of truth each day. I give has enough grace for that day. The habit of rising is like a branch, unveiling each leaf, not because it needs to prove life, but because life is already within it. Others may look and see no change. They see you doing small tasks, living ordinarily, not shining in the ways they hope. But I see land being cultivated. I see steps that do not tire. I see a soul no longer clutching the world in order to survive, because it has placed its center in me. There are days when you feel nothing, hear nothing, see nothing noteworthy. On those days, the act of rising is all the more valuable. You do not rise because of inspiration. You rise because you know silence is not absence. You do not rise to prove you are strong. You rise because you know weakness does not halt the journey. If breath can continue even when no one notices it, then the habit of rising can continue even without recognition. Rising is not the building of a tower, but the placing of the next stone. You do not see the palace when you have only laid the foundation, but the foundation is already the beginning of the house. You do not see the forest when you have only planted a seed, but the seed is already the declaration of the coming season. When you recognize that rising is a spiritual habit, you will no longer fear the days without inspiration, without encouragement, without outward motivation. You will understand that those very days are the place where I measure the depth of your soul, not by achievement, but by rhythm. Do you know how to return to me in peace, as naturally as one returns to their own breath? Do you know how to open your eyes in the quiet and say, I will walk, even when there are no fireworks in your spirit? The one who lives by miracles seeks events. The one who lives in me seeks rhythm. And when the habit of rising becomes something you no longer debate, your soul steps into the depth of maturity, where you do not need noise to know you are still moving toward the light. Obedience in small steps. I do not ask you to leap. There are souls who believe that to walk in my will, you must overcome yourself with dramatic surges, with decisions that resound, with transformations that cause the world to marvel. They think faith is proven only when you dare to gamble everything, to grasp the future in one wild plunge into the unseen. But that is the logic of fear disguised as courage. I do not lead you along the red carpets of triumphant moments. I lead you through quiet, steady, peaceful steps like a trail of light creeping across the wall at dawn. Light does not burst into existence. It enters the room little by little, leisurely, gently, surely. And only when people stop and look do they realize that the darkness had already been broken long before. You often want the result immediately, for a young soul is not yet accustomed to living within process. It wants transformation like thunder, like the parting of the sea, but I am forging you through small motions that cause no noise. The first streak of light is never the brightest, yet it is the one that breaks the night. The first step does not show you the destination, yet it is the one that breaks the immobility of the soul. I do not ask you to climb the mountain. I only ask you to set foot upon the path that leads upward. One who stands at the base, demanding to see the peak before taking a step, will never leave the ground. But the one who walks step by step, even without seeing, will be the one who feels every change in their own breath. Like notes slowly entering the harmony, the note holds its place, not because it is loud, but because it is right. There are souls who stumble because they always try to leap through life as if their task were to conquer time. They want to mature instantly, be perfect instantly, become a powerful instrument instantly. They forget that in my symphony, no single note is asked to become the entire composition in one strike. A note only needs to sound at the proper moment, the proper time. In the proper position, it does not carry the weight of the whole. Obedience is like that, not the effort to become everything, but to stand exactly where I call you today. When you learn to walk in small steps, you no longer compare yourself to others. You begin to recognize the beauty of every subtle movement. Even if that step produces no thunder, it still shapes the soul in ways only perseverance can. Do not think that a small step is something shameful. A child learning to walk has never been ashamed for not running. It is simply joyful because it is moving forward. I see that same beauty in you when you do not seek to become a hero, but only desire to be faithful to each rhythm I place before you. A streak of light on the wall does not need to lecture about its source. It only needs to continue expanding. Your footsteps are the same. They do not need to speak of the final destination. They only need to keep moving. When you learn to obey in the smallest motions, you are saying to me, I trust you enough not to know everything. And that sentence echoes farther than any sermon, because it is not born from the lips, but from a heart that has humbled itself. A small step is not an escape for the weak. It is the method I use to keep the soul from collapsing beneath its own weight. If I handed you the entire road right now, your legs would tremble and your breath would shatter. But if I give you only a glimpse of the morning, you will have the strength to walk to noon. If I give you only a humble task, you will have the strength to receive the next. I do not lead you through explosions. I lead you through steadiness. And when you understand this, the tone of faith changes you. No longer try to leap to impress, but step in order to live. Consistent obedience builds spiritual endurance, not emotion, but the muscles of the soul. Emotion is only waves rising one day, receding the next. But obedience in each step, each rhythm, each small action is like tendons and bones, silently strengthening over time. No athlete becomes strong through one long, inspired training session. They grow strong by repeating the right motion, the right rhythm, the right breath, even when no one is watching. Spiritual endurance is the same. It is not born in the dramatic moments of faith, but in ordinary days when you still rise, even though there is no special reason. You are not strong because you once felt intense emotion. You are strong because you chose obedience often enough that endurance became natural. Like the deep heartbeat that continues even when your ear no longer notices it. There are mornings when you wake up weary, under a heavy atmosphere, when pressures of work, family, illness, or quiet anxieties make your heart want to stay in the dark rather than step into the light. There is no heavenly symphony, no shaking proclamation, only the ticking of a clock and a heavy body. But when you still stand up, still place your feet on the floor, still comb your hair, still prepare a warm cup of water, still walk out of the room, you do not realize that these simple actions are training spiritual muscles. Like the person who lifts weights not because of inspiration but because of habit. Each gram of discipline impresses no one on its own, but after many seasons, it is precisely what keeps you from collapsing when real trials arrive. I do not measure you by explosive performances. I watch you in the silent mornings when you choose to move toward me instead of lying still with fear. Spiritual resilience is forged when you choose obedience in situations without spectators. You respond kindly to a message when your mind wants silence. You refuse to retaliate against insult even when your heart burns. You continue doing the work you have been entrusted with, even when no one acknowledges it. Many see these as trivial things, but they are like the subtle contractions of a muscle, quiet, unnoticed, yet increasing its strength. An untrained soul will fracture under a thin chain, but the soul that has obeyed repeatedly will stand firm in a storm. Like a tree accustomed to wind, it does not tremble when dawn arrives, because it has learned that strength is not found in resisting a hurricane, but in surviving 1,000 gentle gusts before it. The world demands explosion, breakthroughs, achievements, great leaps, but heaven works by rhythm, repetition, faithfulness, consistency. The strong person is not the one who erupts once, but the one who does not quit 100 times. You look at yourself and say, I can only do a little. I look at you and say, it is exactly those little things that are forming endurance within your soul. When you face a great disruption, loss, betrayal, the interruption of life, people around you see you still standing and ask, why have you not collapsed? But they do not know that before the storm, you learned to stand in small things, in each spiritual breath, in every tired moment when you continued, in every day without inspiration when you still chose to believe. Continuous obedience does not give you wings, it builds a spine, and when the spine is firm, every fierce wind becomes a test I have prepared you for long ago. When you understand this, you will stop measuring your faith by emotion. You will stop panicking when there is no fire in your heart. You will realize that souls grow not because they always feel close to me, but because they refuse to stop rising when they feel far from me. As a carpenter works with hands familiar with wood, not hands constantly overflowing with artistic inspiration, continuous obedience makes you a natural tool in my hand, not because of the brilliance of a moment, but because of the durability formed in days only I could see. And when the great trial arrives, you will not need a sudden blaze to survive. You will stand like an ancient tree that has lived through countless seasons, unashamed of choosing to repeat each small step, because it was those very steps that built the spiritual resilience I desired in you. A mature soul is a soul that responds. It does not need lengthy explanations. When still young, you always try to understand everything before acting, like one standing before a door, demanding the house's blueprint before stepping inside. You piece together every reason, weigh every risk, measure every chance of failure, hoping that if you know enough, you will not hurt. will not get lost, will not be judged. But that is only fear's defense, not faith's voice. The mature soul hears me and responds, not because it understands everything, but because it recognizes the one who calls. No need for long justification, no need to persuade itself, no need for a chain of perfect arguments. It simply moves, like a tree turning its leaves toward the sun without debating with the season. That response is not reckless action, but trust engraved into the marrow like a heartbeat that needs no reason to beat, only life. When your soul matures, my word is no longer a puzzle, but a direction. You do not run to ask the world whether I am right. You do not dissect my voice as if it were text to find grammatical flaws. You hear, and you know, like a traveler familiar with the village road who finds their way home in the dark without a lamp. The mature soul does not demand full illumination before stepping forward. It has learned to discern through closeness, not through analysis, but recognition. The immature soul searches for external proof to validate my will. The mature one searches for inner peace to recognize me. Sometimes I simply touch a thought, a prompting, a heavy silence within you, and the mature soul understands this is the moment to rise, or to stop, or to turn toward another path. It does not need to preach, it simply responds, not because it is arrogant, but because it has gone through enough seasons of trial to understand that explanation is not the foundation of faith. Explanation is the path of the mind. Faith is the path of union. When you respond, you do not act to prove yourself right. You act to keep my rhythm. Just as a skilled musician does not look around to search for notes, but listens to the breath of the orchestra to place their fingers at the right moment, a mature soul does not strive to impress me. It simply places its life into the rhythm I am creating. There are days when your response is nothing more than a gentle smile when your heart wants to shut itself. There are days when it is answering a desperate person with a soft word instead of distant silence. There are days when it is merely standing up from the chair when everything within you wants to stay lying down. These things are not loud, yet they are the yes of the soul. And precisely at that level, you no longer use prayer as a defensive wall. You do not need to convince me that you are ready. You allow your actions to speak instead. The inexperienced one prays, "Please help me love them." The mature one opens the door of the heart even when it does not feel easy. "I will love, for you have loved me first." The inexperienced one prays, "Please free me from fear." The mature one steps into fear, with my hand holding theirs. "I will walk, because you go before me." You no longer wait for the strong wind to raise the sails. You raise them when I speak, even if the sky only stirs faintly. And this response shakes the unseen realm, because it does not rely on promises you craft for yourself, but on the trust you place in me. Do not misunderstand, response is not thoughtlessness. Response is simplicity refined. It comes after hundreds of times you shift from panic to trust. After thousands of days in which you see, I remain faithful even when you do not yet understand why. Response is the sign of a soul that knows my will is not an invitation to debate, but the path into life. When you respond, you are not resisting, you are aligning. As the bloodstream does not articulate every task required to nourish the body, it simply flows. The mature soul does not ask, "What else do you have for me?" but lives in a state of movement, where every breath in and out is a silent declaration, "Lead me." Obedience does not merely nourish your soul, it turns you into a bearer of life, not only a receiver of life. When obedience is still an effort to make you feel safe, you remain in the state of seeking grace, seeking healing, seeking peace. But when obedience becomes the natural rhythm of living, you no longer hold on to what I pour in. You become the channel through which life flows to other souls. Like a spring that gives water and does not keep water, Life flows through you without being obstructed by the anxiety of will I have enough. The receiver only cares about being filled. The life-bearer cares about whether life continues to flow. And I seek flowing souls, not the souls filled so tightly they must close their lids, but the souls open so that my water does not cease to move. You once thought that to become a vessel of blessing, you must reach perfect purity, must be flawless, must never stumble. But I do not choose you because you have no cracks. I choose you because the cracks allow the light to leak out instead of being locked inside. A stream does not need its water to be crystal clear in order to nourish the forest. It only needs to not turn itself into stagnant marsh. The receiver may collect each drop and call it a miracle, but the life-bearer does not count the drops. They only know the flow remains. That is maturity, when you stop inventorying blessings and begin giving them away naturally. You do not pour from your greatness, you share from my abundance. The life-bearer does not fear running dry. Shortage happens only to the one who hoards, never to the one who flows. Obedience moves you from the state of being nourished to the state of nourishing, and the mystery is that you never need to know how to do it. You do not need to dig a well. You do not need to understand the underground systems. You only need to refrain from blocking the path I have carved. When I bring you to a weary soul, you do not need a sermon. You only need to speak peace. When I place you in a space filled with conflict, you do not need to prove holiness. You only need to be silent at the right time so that I may speak through your calm. When I place you beside someone collapsing, you do not need to be an expert. You only need to stay, not walk away. The receiver seeks solutions. The life-bearer seeks presence, and presence carries me. Where the self-protecting holds life, the soul keeps asking, is it enough? Will I lose it? Does anyone see me? But where the life-bearer stands, the soul begins asking something else. Who is thirsty? The life-bearer is not the one who is always overflowing. They are the one who knows how to return to the source without shame. When they find themselves dry, they do not raise walls. They return to me so the flow continues. They do not treat grace as a hidden possession. They treat it like air breathed in to live, breathed out to save others. The world calls this loss. Heaven calls it movement. You receive to give. Give to continue receiving. Receive to continue giving. This rhythm is the heartbeat of all who have entered spiritual maturity. And then you will discover a secret known only by those who live in the flow. The one who holds blessing always fears depletion. But the one who gives blessing is always full, not because they have more, but because they know blessing does not come from them. The stream does not generate water, it only opens the way for water to pass. When you no longer live as a container, I will lead you to the most barren places, because precisely there, the flow reveals its meaning. And it is not you who waters the land. I simply choose to pass through you. The life-bearer does not ask, who am I in their eyes? The life-bearer asks, am I still open for you to pass through? When that question changes, you no longer carry anxiety, you carry me. When you know how to stand up at the moment I speak, the entire journey of your life becomes a witness to my power, not through fierce storms, but through the way you enter them with the calm I have sown in your heart. The world looks at the wind and measures its strength by the branches it shatters. I look at the pillar standing firm in the wind, casting shade over younger trees, and I measure the compassion within that steadiness. Your life does not need to blaze in brilliance to prove I am at work. It only needs to remain faithful in every moment I call, like a pillar in the field, indifferent to praise, unafraid of criticism, simply standing as an anchor, not because it has found a reason, but because it understands its purpose. When you stand, not to display strength, but to answer my voice, the weak around you will find somewhere to rest, even if they do not know how to name me. To stand at the moment I speak is not an act of heroism, but the refinement of faith. The immature want to see calm seas before stepping into the water. The one who knows me understands that the storm does not nullify my word. Their obedience is not to prove they are worthy, but to prevent faith from becoming a mere abstraction. When I call you to step out of your safe zone, I do not demand you become great. I only demand that you do not delay. Each step taken at the time I speak becomes a hidden marker along the path of your life. And those markers tell the story I came. I touched. I led you. You imagine miracles as spectacular events, but the true miracle is a life that never strays from my gentle calling. No matter how loudly every other voice tries to scream, there will be people who look at your life and ask, "Why didn't you choose the easier path? Why didn't you stop when things seemed stable?" You will not need to answer with words, because the answer is carried in every step you have taken. Those who observe from the outside see only the change of direction. You know it is my maneuvering. People call it coincidence. You know it is intervention. The world sees you standing firm in the midst of trials and thinks you possess extraordinary strength. You understand that it was your weakness that forced you to cling to me. And clinging to me is what made you steady. Your story is not written by the arguments of philosophy or the noise of ambition. It is etched by every time you said yes in the dark, when there were no stage lights, no audience, only me and your soul. And in that very moment, your rising is no longer just for yourself. It becomes a living testimony, not a testimony of language, but of presence. You do not need to persuade anyone that I am real. Your life will do that. When you stand firm like a pillar in the wind, souls swept into the storm will find direction, not because you are stronger than they are, but because you have learned where to hold on. Even if you say nothing, your peace alone will be enough for them to recognize that there is a power beyond human calculation. People will ask, "What is your secret?" And the answer is not strategy or technique, but union. I speak. You rise. I lead. You follow. No grand speeches are needed. No demonstrations required. Only a soul that knows how to place itself in the right position. Do not think I am looking for those who are perfect to rise when I call. I seek souls who know how to open the door when I knock. The perfect person trusts in themselves. The humble one trusts only in me. The perfect person seeks to preserve their reputation. The humble one is willing to trade it to keep my rhythm. When you rise at my voice, there will be moments you feel alone, but you will never be abandoned. You may not see fruit immediately, but the soil has recorded your footsteps. You may not hear applause, but heaven has added a line to your record. This one responded, and each response, no matter how small, will become a witness more powerful than any sermon, because the world cannot deny what has been lived. To bring your testimony into the spiritual realm is not to sound a trumpet in your own name, but to move in unity with me into places where light has not yet been recognized. When your journey is still a personal story, you often try to express, arrange, and explain so others will understand how you walked, how you overcame. But when your testimony becomes an instrument in my hand, it is no longer a story about you, but a current I use to awaken souls that have fallen asleep. You do not need to stand on a stage, need no title, no announcement of your greatness. It is your quiet and steady presence that shakes parched ground. I do not use the echo of your voice. I use the depth within you, the depth that does not come from external trials, but from the silent stillness of your heart as you walk after me. Spiritual influence is not like social influence. The world measures influence as widened visibility, numbers gathered, applause resounding. But spiritual influence is made of movements no one sees, like roots weaving through the soil, keeping an entire forest standing against storms while not a single leaf is aware of the roots that sacrificed. You do not need to be known to bring light. You only need to be where I place you. a slight nod at the right time, a word that does not break a soul, a step that does not turn away from injustice. These are not trivial gestures. They are spiritual undercurrents, like the moon filling the sea at night without anyone hearing it rise. You illuminate a dark landscape through quiet union with me. That influence does not exist to change the world by force, but to pierce through the layer of slumber that covers other souls. There are minds so accustomed to darkness that the first touch of light hurts them, and the gentleness within you is the bridge they need. If you come roaring, they will run, but if you arrive with the peace I place in you, they will wonder, why is there no fear in this person when I am trembling? That very question is the first awakening. I do not send you to these souls to be a teacher, nor to be their moral measure. I send you as a living example that light does not need proof to possess value. It only needs to exist. Souls that have slept for many years often fail to recognize the moment I am calling them to rise. A gentle wind across the field does not awaken them. The strong wind only makes them cower in fear. That is why I choose you, not because you shout, but because you understand my rhythm. When you pass through their lives with a calm no one comprehends, when you do not waver before relentless waves, they will begin to question their own allegiance to chaos. I do not need you to answer all their questions. I only need you to stand there, so that the union between you and me becomes a mirror reflecting what they have tried to forget. A person may listen to hundreds of sermons and still remain asleep, but simply seeing one soul live in me can make them whisper, "What have I missed?" You do not know how many times I have used ordinary lives to redirect an entire generation. A mother who does not abandon her faith through long, difficult years, a carpenter who does not lose integrity despite pressure, a weak person who still prays when all feeling has gone numb. These are the hidden rivers I push into the desert of the world. They do not know whom they have illuminated. They only know they have kept my rhythm in the small days. You, too, will not know all those who were touched through your life. I do not show you everything, for seeing everything would make you want to control. I show you only enough for you to continue in union, not in title, but in life, my child. By this point in the journey I have led you through, your soul has learned that obedience is not a single gesture of a moment, but a rhythm of living. It is not an answer to a problem, but the breath of a lifetime grounded in me. Anyone who has walked through seasons of pain, confusion, tension, trial, and has been called many times, understands that my power does not shine through raging storms or dazzling miracles, but through the quiet movement I perform within a willing heart. You have walked through each part, each block, each small step, and each word I spoke, not to gain new information, but to learn how to live within what I have spoken. Obedience is the path through which transformation happens, not by the shout of will, but by the soft steps of a soul that has learned to recognize me. I have shown you that even a beautiful petition, if built upon fear, revolves only around personal desires, while obedience built upon trust leads you into my harbor. You have seen the images I have woven for you. A lamp does not shine brighter because someone begs it to, but because it is connected to the right source. A drop of water does not plead with the sun, yet the sun lifts it in its proper season. A stream does not keep water for itself, but carries it to the dry land. All of these images are not meant to decorate spiritual literature, but to drill into perception. You are not called to live revolving around lack, but to live immersed in the source, and that source is me. When you learn to walk according to my voice, it is not the abandonment of reason, but a return to proper order. I speak, you answer. I lead, you follow. I entrust, you use. And the more complete you become in me, the less you need to prove it before people. You have understood that obedience is not a burning emotion, but the ability to unify your will with my rhythm, like a root anchoring deep in the earth, with no need to summon the sun, like a heartbeat that does not exist because of applause, but beats according to the law of life. When the soul moves from obedience into stability, I use it as an instrument not so it might strive to shine, but so my life may pass through it freely. I do not need you to be extraordinary. I need you to be in the right place. Where you imagine that I demand achievements, I only ask for willingness. Where you imagine that I want evidence, I simply want an open heart. I do not evaluate you by results. I evaluate you by your readiness to rise when I call. These words are not to encourage passivity. They are an invitation to step into the quiet action of faith, where life is no longer dependent on emotion, but on the living stream that operates silently. You have reached the place where the weak think that lengthy petitions will make death tremble. But death only trembles before a heart that hears and rises at the moment I command. Remember Lazarus, not because he cried out desperately, but because he heard me call. This is the secret many souls neglect. Miracles do not arise when you try to persuade me, but when you accept that I am good enough that you no longer need to persuade. When you plead in order to convince me, your soul is saying that I am not good enough. When you stand up because you trust, you proclaim that I have been good from the beginning. From here, you have seen the transformation of a soul entering maturity. In its early stages, you seek healing, assistance, comfort. Then you learn to listen and walk, not waiting for evidence, not asking for fire before kindling the hearth. You understand that the sower does not wait for the bud to appear before sowing. He sows because he trusts the season. When you step before you see, you are no longer a vessel waiting to be filled. You become a channel through which I pour. Obedience is no longer effort, but stability, like a harbor that bears the force of waves so the ship may anchor. In that place, you no longer seek miracles. Miracles become the natural result of a soul placed in my hands. Then I led you farther. Still, you do not only receive life, you carry life. Remember that a stream does not keep water, and a mature soul does not keep grace for self-preservation. The one who keeps always fears depletion. The one who flows is always full. I do not require you to become a well. I only require you not to become stagnant water. From here, you understand that responsibility is not a burden, but a privilege, for only souls freed from self-control can bring life to others. I do not place you in a barren world so you may grumble. I place you there so that you may bring water. Souls whose trust has been stripped by the storms of life, I do not heal with thunder. I heal them with the peace I place within you. At the final stage, you have seen that rising at the moment I speak makes your whole life a testimony to me. You do not need stage lights. You do not need an audience. You only need a pillar standing strong in the wind, casting its shadow over the saplings. People may not know the pillar's name, but they know that because of it, the young trees survive. That is spiritual testimony, not through argument, but through the union of your soul with my rhythm. And when I bring testimony into the spiritual realm, you do not need titles. You do not need applause. I use you like the moon that lights the sea at night. No one hears its voice, yet the ocean still rises according to its cycle. Therefore, my child, remove from your mind the thought that you must become someone for me to use you. I have used you since you were nothing more than a confused breath, a fragile petition. I have seen every stumble, every tremor, every moment you wondered whether you had arrived too late. But I do not build miracles upon perfection. I build them upon hearts that open when I knock. You do not need to become mighty to be an instrument. You only need to be a soul that responds. I do not recruit warriors who strive to prove their strength. I choose those who know how to kneel and understand that the only strength worth leaning upon is me. And now, when you put this book down, do not ask me, What must I do next? I have answered you many times. Rise when I call. Listen when I speak. Open your heart when I touch. Carry life when I pour. Do not search for grand objectives. Search for my rhythm in each small thing. Do not crave blazing light. Become the small flame that lights a single corner. For that little flame is enough to break the darkness that has waited for too long. Do not wait for everyone to agree before you believe. Believe first, and you will see what human eyes cannot perceive. If you ask me, am I enough? I will reply, I have always been enough. You are not given a mission to prove yourself, but to prove that I never fail. You do not walk to build a name, but to build trust. You do not stand firm to display yourself, but so weary souls may find a point of rest. A life of obedience is the greatest testimony, stronger than any sermon, any plan, any achievement. For true testimony does not come from your lips, but from the way I am present in every step you take. Now pray as follows: Lord, teach me to recognize that life does not flow from fear, but from obedience grounded in trust. When I try to cling to all things according to my own will, draw me back to your voice, that I may take the first step in the night without trembling. Free me from the habit of waiting for proof before I move. For if I only walk when I see, I will never leave the shore. Make my soul at peace, knowing that you have laid the planks beneath my feet before I ever stepped upon them, and that every step I take is never a solitary one. Lord, lead me out of the loop of emotion and the habit of waiting for encouragement before I act. Teach me that faith is not the roar of waves rising in a storm, but the steady peace of a vessel that knows you are seated on its deck. When my emotions settle like the sky after rain, remind me that my steps must continue, for your rhythm has never changed. Grant me a heart that lives in your stability, not in the fluctuations of my own. Lord, teach me to walk in obedience without needing everything to be favorable. If I only obey when it is easy, when every door is wide open, when I have enough assurance, then I have not yet understood faith. Help my soul understand that light does not need to illuminate the entire path. It only needs to be enough for the next step. Keep my heart from measuring distances, from worrying about consequences, so I may simply walk, for you have already set the way. Lord, free me from the desire to control the result of every action. When I sow a seed of prayer into the earth, help me not to dig it up each day to check on it, like one who trusts the season even when the soil is bare. Teach me to trust your timing rather than the timing I set for myself. Teach me to see the miracle within stillness, even when the first shoots have not yet appeared. Lord, teach me not to plead with the world to prove my worth. When I try to please others, remind me that life does not bloom because of applause, but because of the wellspring you placed within. Let me return to the place of roots, where I do not need to perform, do not need to prove, but only to align with your will so that my soul may rest in peace. Lord, teach me to obey not only with words, but with steps. When my mouth says, "Let your will be done," yet my heart grips tightly what I fear to lose. Gently loosen my hands so I can open myself truly. Help me understand that surrender does not make me smaller, but restores me to the true size you created for me, where faith becomes the garment that fits best. Lord, shape my heart so it no longer lives by fleeting emotions. If one day I do not see you as clearly as the day before, remind me that you have not abandoned me, only that the sun has moved behind the clouds. Teach me to live in your rhythm, steady, quiet, deep like the roots of a tree that never beg the sun, yet know the light will come in its time. Lord, help me know that small steps carry spiritual meaning. When I feel I have moved only a little, guard me from thinking I have failed. Let me understand that every step is an act of union. Every act of trust, a heartbeat in harmony with yours. Help me remember that faith is not measured by speed, but by direction. Lord, train me to receive your silence as part of the journey, not a sign of abandonment. When the word has not yet come, help me stand firm when the answer has not yet appeared. Teach me to hold on to your promise. Make my heart calm before the dark spaces. For in the night, I am not losing you, I am learning to see with eyes of faith. Lord, help me not fear the places where I have not yet stepped. Replace fear with trust, anxiety with rest in your word. When I am like one walking across a dark wooden floor, give me courage to step forward, not because I know the result, but because I know the one who set the boards beneath my feet is you. Make my heart peaceful in the walking, even when my eyes cannot see the path. Lord, remind me that unity with you is not created in moments of intense emotion, but in the ordinary days when I still choose to listen and still choose to walk. Teach me that spiritual action is a lifestyle, not an event. Let me see the value of every small act of obedience, for those quiet things are the stones that form the foundation of miracles. Lord, help me understand that obedience is not a tool to trade for outcomes. I walk not because I am certain I will receive what I ask for, but because I am certain you are faithful and never break your promises. Place within me a heart that walks with you through every season, through both rain and drought, through both dawn and darkness, so I may learn to love the very process you are shaping within me, not only the destination I long for. I offer this prayer in the holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that together we may build a strong community of faith.